Another really important data type in programming is this data type that represents data that isn't a number. So often when I've got text, so sometimes I want to have variables that represent like a name. My name is David, right? And the way that MATLAB represents data with text in it is with this variable called char, or this variable type, data type called char. Okay, so char stands for characters, right? And the the letter D, capital D, the letter A, VID are all characters that MATLAB can represent. So if I look, there's a lot of information about how characters work in MATLAB, and often we'll have to use characters to represent some kind of text. So a label for when we plot data, we're going to have to name the x-axis the time and the y-axis concentration, something like that. We need to give it a title and so on. Sometimes we've got names of a list of people that we want to process and so on. So sometimes data doesn't have to come in, or often data doesn't come in the form of numbers. It comes in the form of characters, chars, and we must be able to work with them. So MATLAB has a lot of functionality built in to manipulate names and so on. I don't want to spend too much time on it right now. I just want to introduce you to the ideas. As we get more sophisticated with our programming, then we'll have to employ some of those functions, and in which case then I'll explain them. But for now, I just want you to understand how to create data that is a character type. So the way that we do it is just like this. We can type in the data in two quotation marks. So when I put it in the little quotation marks, anything in between that is fair game for a character string. So I could call that y, right? Now y is that, and y represents a data type where all of the data is represented as characters, and y, as you can see, because it's a longer set of characters, it takes up more space in memory. So we call this collection of characters a character string. It's a string of characters, and as we add more stuff, so let's say z, that takes up more memory. Okay. So there's an interesting connection between characters and integers. So how does the computer represent these characters on your computer? Well, what's happening is, let's say the name again. The name is David. What I can do is I can try and figure out what these characters mean in terms of a computer if I convert this character data type to an unsigned integer. So if I type uint, so now we know what a uint is. A uint 16, an unsigned integer 16-bit data type, and I put in name. So name is David. If I push enter, then what happens is it gives me a string of numbers. And what's interesting is that these numbers represent in memory what your computer, where your computer points to for the different letters. So that's capital D, that's small a, that's small v, that's small I, and that's small d. So the one way that we can check that is there's a function in MATLAB called char, and char can create a character string data type. And so if I put in, if I just put in a number like 68, then what will happen is we pass in 68, and then the function looks up what 68 represents in terms of a character, and then it outputs the letter D. So that's just a nice way to show you that all characters in MATLAB as a data type are also being represented essentially as numbers, as a string of unsigned integer numbers. One nice function that we can use to check the length of a character string is with this function called length, and I can put in the name and it will give me 5. So that's just some functionality. We can also create variables character variables with this char. So let me call it a. A is equal to char, and then put in 68 for instance. And a now is a char variable type. So a is a char variable type. One last thing I want to say is sometimes I want to have a message. Say I want to have a message variable, and I want to write something like that's not correct. Okay, but I want to put in a little inverted comma as well. If I do that, then because I'm using an inverted comma to create a character string, this won't work. It will give me an error because it says what are you trying to, if this is my character string, then what is this stuff over here, and then what is this final inverted comma over there? That doesn't make sense. So if we want to include inverted commas in our text, then we actually need to use 2. So we put in a second one, and then that gives us the correct result.